If anyone has ever wondered what hell on earth is like, then join us for today's film to find the answer. The film tells the story of Kyle, an engineer working in a steel mill in Russia. His life used to be very happy with his beautiful wife, who always looked forward to his return after each workday. However, his demanding job often required Kyle to work overtime. Sometimes a whole month would pass before the couple saw each other. One day, Kyle decided to spend the entire weekend taking his wife on a seaside vacation to rekindle their romance. He called to tell his wife the news on his way home. Hearing the news, she was extremely excited and started preparing everything. However, while they were talking on the phone, the power in the house suddenly went out. After checking the circuit breaker and fixing the problem, she happily reported back to Kyle. He comforted his wife, saying they would see each other in just 10 minutes. Before the happy laughter could fade, tragedy struck. A man dressed in black suddenly attacked Kyle's wife from behind. A blood-curdling scream rang out, making Kyle realize his wife was in danger. Without hesitation, he floored the accelerator, driving like crazy towards home, ignoring the crowded streets. He was normally an ordinary driver, but today, driven by love and fear, Kyle became an ace driver, navigating every corner. Meanwhile, his wife was still struggling with the killer. When she tried to resist, he pulled out a knife to threaten her. Unyielding, she fought back fiercely, but the heartbreaking outcome was inevitable. He used the sharp knife to stab her directly. When Kyle arrived home, he rushed in searching for his wife and froze when he saw her lying motionless on the sofa, her eyes wide open in fear, her heart no longer beating. Suddenly, the killer lunged out and attacked Kyle. After hitting him, he quickly fled outside. Kyle chased him to a bus, where the two continued to struggle. The killer used the same knife he had used to kill his wife to attack, but Kyle managed to parry it. However, he escaped once again. Just then, the police arrived. Seeing Kyle holding the weapon and causing chaos, they immediately subdued him, creating an opportunity for the killer to escape. In the days after his wife's death, the case went to trial. However, thanks to his wealthy family, the killer bribed the judge and the court, resulting in his acquittal. Kyle couldn't accept seeing the murderer walk free. He lunged forward, snatched a gun from a police officer, and shot him dead right there. This act led to Kyle being sentenced to life imprisonment. Kyle was transferred to Karavi prison, known as Hell on Earth. Anyone attempting to escape from this place would immediately be brought back as a lifeless corpse. On his very first day, he experienced the brutality of the guards. They shaved his head and confiscated all his valuables. But Kyle secretly kept a picture of his wife, hidden in his underwear. When they discovered his wedding ring, they demanded he hand it over. Kyle refused and was brutally beaten by them. Even the picture of his wife was mocked by them. After the beating, Kyle was taken to a communal cell. That night, while everyone was sound asleep, the guards took a prisoner named Billy, who had a bright appearance, to the cell of Andre, a perverted inmate. Andre had bribed the guards to possess Billy. All night, Billy was tormented by Andre, leaving him physically and mentally exhausted. The next morning, Kyle saw the devastated Billy return, but didn't know what had happened. Later that day, while walking through the detention area, Kyle spotted an inmate who looked exactly like the man who had murdered his wife. In a fit of rage, he rushed forward and attacked him without knowing right or wrong. The fight continued until the guards used electric batons to subdue them both. For causing trouble, Kyle was thrown into a special pit reserved for defiant inmates. The pit was like a deep well, surrounded by 4 solid walls. It was also a sewage drainage point, filled with an unbearable stench. Kyle had only a small corner to sit in, and he was confined there for a month, in suffocating darkness and despair. Kyle recalled the beautiful memories of his beloved wife. From a happily married engineer, he had now fallen into the depths of tragedy. The only thing keeping him anchored was the image and love for his wife. Kyle had thought that since the day he lost his wife, life had no meaning anymore. Everything completely collapsed when he was thrown into prison, where his existence was worse than a dog's. Finding no reason to continue living, he went on a hunger strike, refusing all meals. In his hunger-induced dreams, images of his wife and their past happiness resurfaced. He longed to follow her, to the point of using his only shirt to make a noose, but the rope was too weak to take him. He continued to bang his head against the wall, but no matter how hard he tried, death wouldn't come. Amidst his delirium, a small butterfly suddenly appeared in his cell. Kyle thought it was his beloved wife appearing to be with him. He heard her familiar voice, "Wherever you are, I am always with you." That whisper made him realize she wanted him to live on. For the first time in days, Kyle took the prison meal, accepting his existence. Sometime later, Kyle was moved to a new cell, but there, he had to live with a ferocious African-American inmate, known as 451, who had killed 3 previous cellmates. The guards didn't forget to suggest that if Kyle paid up, they would help him change cells, but Kyle ignored them, accepting his entry into what everyone called the Lion's Den. In the early days, 451 acted strangely normal. Even when Kyle had to use the toilet right in front of him while he was reading, he did nothing to him. But the suffocating atmosphere always kept him vigilant. Then he made some new friends, including Billy and an old man in a wheelchair, a long-term prisoner who knew every nook and cranny of the place. He told him that the prison was completely bought off by Andre, a wealthy gang leader, allowing him to manipulate everything. He advised Kyle to save money to buy peace and warned him about the danger of being with 451, but Kyle wasn't too concerned, as he hadn't touched him yet. However, that brief peace quickly vanished. That night, the nightmare of his wife's death returned, causing Kyle to wake up screaming in the night. The scream angered his cellmate. He jumped up, using his large hand to clamp down tightly on Kyle's face. Kyle thought he was going to be suffocated, but luckily, the man eventually let him go. The next day, Kyle went to the guards, gave them some money to ask for a cell change, but they sneered, saying the amount wasn't enough. Kyle had no other choice but to promise them for next time, though unsure how he would get the money. During a break in the yard, Kyle accidentally learned a terrifying truth. The guards often organized life-and-death fights between prisoners, viewing it as entertainment and a betting tool. The strongest would be pitted against each other. The winner might receive some favors from the guards, while the loser, if not killed in the ring, would be left to die of exhaustion. In this prison, Andre was undefeated, a brutal leader feared by everyone. However, for 151, Kyle's cellmate was not forced to participate in the fights. Instead, he was a useful tool for the guards, used to eliminate prisoners they didn't want to handle themselves. If anyone defied the guards, they would be locked up with this man, and their fate was almost sealed. That evening, Billy, Kyle's small friend, was dragged by Andre to his cell for depraved acts. But this time, Billy had prepared a sharp weapon. Billy unexpectedly injured himself. The next day, during outdoor work, a prisoner was ordered by the guards to provoke Kyle. This man falsely accused Kyle of starting trouble, leading the guards to allow other prisoners to brutally beat him. Kyle tried to fight back, but outnumbered, he could do nothing but endure the beating. He was even unjustly punished, thrown back into the dark, filthy cell, filled with the stench of waste and biting cold whenever it rained. Once again, in desperate circumstances, the image of his deceased wife became the motivation helping Kyle persevere. When released, Kyle returned to the cell with 451. On the way, he glimpsed guards bringing delicious food to another cell, undoubtedly Andre's. But the chain of tragedies didn't stop. During a yard assembly, Andre brazenly called Kyle over and threatened, "Soon, it will be your turn for me to deal with." Kyle tried to ignore the threat, but the scene that unfolded immediately after changed his mind. A prisoner suddenly pulled out a hidden knife and slit another man's throat right in the middle of the yard. Blood splattered everywhere, and everything happened so fast that even the guards couldn't react in time. Kyle stood frozen, realizing the brutality of this place. After returning to his cell, Kyle accidentally discovered 451's journal and curiously read it secretly. In it, he wrote extensively, but the general content revolved around one philosophy: turn hatred into strength and constantly train oneself to become stronger than anyone else, because that is the only way to survive. Kyle sensed the depth behind the rough words. The next day, during mealtime, Andre approached Kyle again. This time, brazenly, he propositioned him to be his girlfriend, replacing Billy, to serve him every night. Andre's insolent and humiliating attitude pushed Kyle beyond his limit. In a fit of rage, he threw a punch at the man, but Andre, with his massive build and overwhelming strength, immediately retaliated, easily overpowering Kyle. The consequence of this reckless act was, once again, Kyle being thrown into the foul-smelling dark room, which the guards considered the worst punishment. But this time, Kyle didn't let resentment consume him. Instead of complaining, he turned the tiny room into a physical training space. Day after day, he trained relentlessly. Push-ups, every pain, every drop of sweat was turned into motivation to become stronger. Outside, other prisoners continued their hard labor. During one work session, they unexpectedly discovered an old bomb. Unfortunately, a vehicle accidentally ran over it, causing the bomb to explode, creating chaos throughout the prison. Seizing the opportunity, Billy and another prisoner risked escape. But the plan was soon discovered. In the pursuit, one was shot dead on the spot, while Billy, though temporarily escaping, was quickly recaptured. He was brutally tortured, becoming a living warning to anyone who dared to think of escaping. Meanwhile, Kyle continued his training relentlessly. He worked tirelessly day and night, ignoring what was happening outside. His body gradually changed, becoming solid, muscular, with every fiber defined. His long beard and determined eyes made him look dangerous and completely different from the weak man he once was. Day by day, he transformed into a new person, stronger and more resilient. Noticing Kyle's transformation, the head guard had a cruel idea. He decided to organize a fight between Kyle and Andre, the so-called undefeated champion of the prison. He believed Kyle had no chance of winning, so all the guards placed their bets on Andre, anticipating a bloody spectacle. The fight quickly commenced in a tense and violent atmosphere. As the guards predicted, initially, Kyle was completely overwhelmed by Andre. Despite becoming much stronger, Kyle still couldn't match the physical strength and fighting experience of this giant. The two charged at each other like wild beasts, and every punch from Andre stunned Kyle. The prisoners watching held their breath, especially Kyle's friends. They shouted encouragement, trying to urge him to get up. But when Andre dragged him to a nearby iron post and ruthlessly attacked his weakest points, suddenly, Kyle delivered a powerful kick to Andre's groin, making him stagger. Wasting no precious second, Kyle lunged forward and bit straight into Andre's neck, clamping down so hard that blood spurted profusely. The entire yard fell silent. No one expected that Kyle, once weak and gentle, could do such a horrific thing. That day, Kyle not only defeated the strongest man in prison, but also lost a part of himself. His eyes were now cold and fierce, as if he had become another beast. The black man, who had been quietly observing him, approached Kyle and reminded him to be careful not to lose his humanity. But Kyle ignored him. He had changed and no longer cared about advice. With Andre gone, Kyle naturally became the strongest in prison. This gave the colonel, the head of the place, the idea to organize a new fight to exploit Kyle for his bloody entertainment. A new prisoner was brought in, a huge man twice Kyle's size, named Valia, with bulging muscles and cruel eyes. During the introduction, he nearly broke Kyle's arm, making everyone watching worried about the upcoming fight. That day was Russian National Day, and the prisoners enjoyed rare privileges like listening to music and entertainment. The guards, in the festive mood, were somewhat negligent. Billy, Kyle's friend, took this opportunity to try escaping again. He secretly opened a sewer cover to get out, but before he could get far, he was discovered by the guards. They immediately beat Billy savagely. The warden approached and coldly said, "If you serve me obediently, I'll let you live, otherwise, I'll turn you into a ghost." After saying that, he ordered Billy taken back to his cell. It turned out, Billy's escape attempt had been revealed to the guard by the man in the wheelchair. That's how he knew Billy's plan. In return, the wheelchair-bound man would receive some medicine from the guard to treat the sores on his body. However, the exchange between the two was witnessed by 451. Since the arrival of the new prisoner, fights in the prison occurred continuously. However, those capable of defeating him here couldn't be found. As for Billy, after being caught for the failed escape, he was returned to the old cell to serve the perverts. Billy refused to submit, so he was tortured until he was no longer human. Kyle, upon learning this, rushed over, but it was too late. Billy died in Kyle's arms. Before dying, Billy said that despite being weak and pressured by them, no matter what happened, not to let them turn him into a killing machine. Afterwards, Billy was buried like an animal in an unknown hole. Billy's last words awakened Kyle. When they forced him into the yard to fight the newcomer Valia, Kyle refused and declared he wouldn't fight anymore. Even when Valia grabbed his neck to force him, Kyle didn't retaliate. The angry guards moved to subdue him, but Kyle maintained his stance. Finally, they had to remove Kyle from the yard and replace him with someone else. However, they certainly wouldn't let him off. Later, they hung Kyle from a post day and night, declaring that if he agreed to fight, they would spare him. Despite enduring harsh weather, scorching heat by day and freezing rain by night, Kyle did not change his mind. Inside the prison, 451 pretended to ask the wheelchair man to buy alcohol. When the exchange took place, he poured all the alcohol on the wheelchair man and exposed his betrayal of Billy. The dying wheelchair man tried to justify himself, claiming he was pitiful, sick all over, confined to a wheelchair, just wanting money for medicine, not wanting Billy to die like that. But his excuses fell on deaf ears. For 51 used a lighter to burn the traitor to death, just as he had punished his teacher. It turned out that in the past, for 51 was a diligent student, but was discriminated against because of his skin color. His teacher, who often comforted and encouraged him, secretly planned to use him as a sexual tool. Upon discovering the truth, 451 burned him alive, which was why he was imprisoned. This time, he wanted to deliver justice himself to those deserving punishment. After being hung up day and night, Kyle seemed exhausted, but he still didn't change his stance. This made the prisoners see him in a completely different light. They realized Kyle was fighting not just for himself, but for everyone. From then on, they also realized that if they all united, the guards couldn't turn them into entertainment. The next day, when the fight was organized as usual, no prisoner stepped forward to fight. Faced with the strong resistance of everyone, the guards couldn't torture them all, but they were furious and planned another cowardly scheme. The warden went to the colonel and asked for permission to shoot Kyle dead to eliminate the threat. However, a cleaning prisoner overheard everything and quickly informed everyone. That evening, Kyle was released and taken to the infirmary. After a few days of treatment, he recovered. However, as soon as he recovered, Kyle was sent back to the filthy basement as before. Then, the colonel ordered him brought to the center of the prison, where the cells were located. Here, he brought a tall, large man to force Kyle to fight him. This man had mental issues, so he was chained up. As soon as the chain was released, he immediately lunged like a rabid dog, attacking Kyle. Not wanting to fight, Kyle tried to run away. However, Kyle was eventually caught while being thrown like an object. Luckily, Kyle hit the wall hard, making a sound. That very sound woke up the inmate. He recognized Kyle and approached to acknowledge his acquaintance. It turned out, when Kyle was thrown into the basement, he discovered someone was imprisoned in the cell next to his. He had used his hand to tap on the wall to signal. Although they didn't speak, they communicated this way. Therefore, upon hearing the familiar sound, the inmate recognized Kyle and stopped fighting. This was unexpected by the guards, making them furious. They drew their guns and forced the two to fight. However, the chained inmate, upon seeing the guards, went berserk and charged towards them. He was shot multiple times, but remained defiant, charging in, lifting each guard, and attacking. Other prisoners also broke down their doors and rushed out. That night, an unprecedented riot broke out in the prison, plunging everything into chaos. Perhaps, those prisoners were also people pushed to the brink by these guards. Therefore, none could hold back any longer. This was their chance to vent their anger on the guards. But Kyle and 451 knew that with full weaponry, the guards would easily suppress them. Therefore, the two chose not to attack, but sat in a corner talking. After the riot, everyone was locked up for 2 weeks without being allowed out. At this time, Kyle finally had the chance to tell 451 what he had been through and his desire to get out of there. 451 said he would help Kyle. He took out a bundle of papers from his secret stash and said he had been there for over 20 years, documenting all the deaths in the prison. That was the evidence to bring the self-proclaimed justice dispensers here to light. However, to do that, Kyle had to participate in the fight one more time. That was the only way to help him get out of this place. Because according to 451, if Kyle agreed to fight this time, after the match ended, the guards would take him somewhere and eliminate him there. That was the only chance to get out of prison. Kyle accepted the fight, facing Valia, the strongest here. The fight was incredibly tense. Valia was very strong. His steel fists hammered Kyle relentlessly, making him feel like he would die instantly. But Kyle knew this was the only chance. If he couldn't beat this man, he would die in the ring. Therefore, he gathered all his strength, breaking one of Valia's arms. Valia refused to submit, pulled out a knife intending to attack Kyle, but accidentally stabbed another prisoner instead. Pressing his advantage, he grabbed Valia's neck and slammed him hard against the iron post, finishing him off. Just as 451 predicted, after Kyle won, the guards secretly took him to a vehicle to prepare for his elimination. However, 451 had prepared in advance. He bribed a prisoner there and obtained the key to the basement. As Kyle was being taken to the vehicle, before they could act, 451 appeared from behind, knocking out one guard. Kyle took down the remaining one. He could only obediently unlock Kyle's handcuffs, wanting to say Kyle would be caught again. But before he could act on that thought, Kyle pushed the vehicle onto him, condemning him to a wheelchair for the rest of his life. Afterwards, Kyle took his clothes, put them on, and then drove the car out of the prison. Before leaving, Kyle invited 451 to come with him, but he refused. He said that everyone has their own choice, and he chose to stay here. Kyle, after getting in the car, managed to deceive the guards and got out safely, carrying the evidence. As for 451, after returning to the prison, he didn't go back to his cell, but went straight to the colonel's room, the mastermind behind all the crimes here. He used pliers to pull out all the colonel's teeth, leaving him unconscious on the floor. 451 sat leisurely on the sofa, drinking alcohol, waiting for the guards to come and take him away. 3 months after Kyle got out, the evidence he possessed helped expose all the crimes of this prison. Under pressure from multiple sides, This hell on earth was completely shut down. Perhaps, from now on, the fate of the prisoners will change. They will be treated more humanely. The story of Kyle and the prisoners is not just a life and death struggle, but also a journey in search of freedom and justice. Despite being pushed to the extreme, they did not give up hope, but stood resiliently against oppression. They understood that sometimes the struggle is not just about winning on the battlefield, but also about the victory within each person when preserving dignity and belief in oneself.